QuitSmokingWeed.com, the podcast on Spotify.
Most people who try to quit weed don't fail because they're weak. They fail because they try to run on motivation, and motivation always runs out. Welcome to the QSW podcast. We're your hosts, both former daily smokers, now part of the QSW team.
And you are probably listening right now because you are a daily smoker who has tried to put it down before.
Yeah, maybe multiple times. You gather up all your energy, you make a firm decision in the morning, and you just dive in.
Right, and you might make it a few days, you might even make it a couple of weeks, but you always hit a wall.
And when you hit that wall, you turn inward. You tell yourself you just lack discipline. Today is about completely dismantling that myth. We're going to show you why willpower is biologically flawed from the very start.
Well, the standard advice we hear everywhere completely misdiagnoses the reality. People tell you to just stay motivated.
Or tape reasons to your bathroom mirror.
Yeah, which treats quitting like a test of character. But the process of quitting a substance you use daily is not a character test. It is a strictly neurochemical process.
Because motivation is just an emotion, right?
Exactly. And like any emotion, it is highly unstable. It fluctuates based on your blood sugar, your stress levels, and your physical exhaustion. It fades right when you need it most.
We consistently see this play out in what we call the 9 p.m. couch scenario.
I mean, it perfectly illustrates the biological problem. Consider your state of mind in the morning. You wake up, you drink your coffee, and you feel rested.
Your prefrontal cortex is fully charged.
Right. That part of your brain handles logic and long-term planning. So your motivation is at its absolute peak.
But then you actually have to live your day. You go to work, you deal with frustrating emails, sit in terrible traffic, and manage interpersonal conflicts.
And by the time you drop your keys on the counter and sit down on your couch at 9 p.m., you are literally a different person biologically. You have severe decision fatigue.
The prefrontal cortex is practically offline at that point.
So the limbic system takes over. And the limbic system, well, it does not care at all about your long-term health goals.
It just wants immediate relief.
It wants a quick dopamine release to soothe the nervous system. Motivation simply cannot compete with a stressed limbic system demanding immediate relief.
It is like packing for a hike. Packing in the morning is super easy.
Oh, yeah. You have all the energy in the world.
But actually climbing the mountain when you are physically exhausted and your brain is screaming to stop, that is the reality. How can anyone realistically fight their own limbic system when they are completely depleted?
They really cannot. And the entire point of our approach is that they should not try. What actually works is structure.
Decisions made well in advance.
Yes, long before the evening craving ever hits. Motivation is wonderful when it happens to be there, but a structural system works regardless of your emotional state.
To really grasp why we desperately need that structure, we have to look at the harsh biological reality of the first 72 hours.
This is the critical window. THC is fat-soluble, and it has a half-life of roughly 3 to 5 days.
And over the months or years you have been smoking daily, your endocannabinoid system has heavily adjusted to that constant external supply.
It acts a lot like a smart thermostat.
Right. If you constantly run a massive space heater in your living room, the house central heating system realizes it does not need to work anymore and just shuts itself off.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. Your brain produces its own natural cannabinoids, like anandamide. But heavy THC use makes your brain stop producing them and remove its own receptors to maintain balance.
So when you suddenly stop, the body goes through a painful recalibration.
Which is the direct biological cause of every single withdrawal symptom you experience. You are going to experience severe sleep disruption, vivid dreams, and night sweats.
Plus irritability, spikes in anxiety, and physical restlessness.
Yeah, and you will probably deal with a noticeably reduced appetite and some mild gastrointestinal discomfort.
I know that feeling. When you are in the middle of it, a craving hits, and your brain registers it as an absolute emergency. It feels like sheer panic.
But reframing that panic is essential. When you know what is actually happening physically, it changes how you experience the discomfort. These symptoms are entirely predictable and strictly time-limited.
A craving is really just a wave. It rises, it hits a peak of intensity, and then it breaks and recedes.
The panicked brain tries to convince you it will last forever unless you smoke. But physiologically, the brain cannot sustain that level of acute craving indefinitely. The chemical wave always breaks.
So the mindset shift here is huge. You do not have to sit there and process the terrifying idea of quitting forever. Your only job is to survive the next 20 minutes.
Just outlast the immediate chemical wave until the alarm system shuts off. And because we understand this severe physical reality, it becomes incredibly obvious why we need a system that does not rely on feeling strong.
A concrete plan, not a fleeting feeling. So let us look at the specific decisions you must make in advance.
The initial step is establishing a specific quit date, usually 3 to 7 days in the future. You need to write that date down physically on a calendar and tell at least one person in your life about it.
Pre-made decisions are just so powerful. It converts quitting from an ongoing daily debate into an event that has already been settled.
You completely eliminate the cognitive load of having to choose. You remove the daily negotiation. Next, you have to actively replace the evening slot.
Because that time window where you usually smoked is still going to exist in your day.
Right. If you always smoke right after dinner, that specific hour is going to feel like a massive, uncomfortable void. The idle time is highly dangerous.
So you must decide well in advance what specific activity will fill it. A brisk walk, a phone call, maybe a highly engaging video game.
The actual activity matters much less than the simple fact that you made the decision before the craving ever arrived. You also need to actively map out the critical hours of your evening in the first 2 weeks to eliminate empty windows.
But mapping out your time is completely useless if your physical environment is constantly bombarding your brain with visual triggers.
The environment must change before the mindset ever will. Environmental cues completely bypass the logical prefrontal cortex and go straight to the reward centers.
I have to be a little skeptical here for the sake of the listener. Does moving a chair or throwing away some leftover rolling papers really make a measurable difference?
It sounds trivial on the surface, but it consistently matters far more than people expect. We have to look at cue-induced wanting.
So just looking at your grinder sitting on the coffee table causes a reaction.
Your visual cortex communicates directly with the striatum, and your brain actually releases a small spike of dopamine just from seeing the object.
Wow, so your environment is literally initiating a chemical cascade that fights your decision to quit before you even touch the weed.
Yes. And if you do not follow through and smoke, that initial dopamine spike drops below your baseline, which creates a physical feeling of deficit and craving.
Which means the hardest decision, not using, must be made only once under ideal conditions.
Exactly. Remove all access and paraphernalia before the actual quit date arrives. Throw away the remaining cannabis, the grinders, the glass, and the specific lighters. Eliminate it completely while your motivation is high.
You are also talking about changing the physical layout of your environment.
Rearranging your furniture breaks the spatial cues. If you always sat in the exact same corner of the couch to smoke, change where you sit. Disrupt those visual and spatial associations.
The physical space is one thing, but the social dimension of the environment is just as critical. We have to talk about the people around you.
The social environment is incredibly powerful due to mirror neurons in the brain. Creating strict distance from cannabis-centered social situations during the first 2 weeks vastly outperforms trying to test your willpower.
Sitting in a circle while your friends are passing a joint is just torturing your own exhausted nervous system.
It is a complete biological setup for failure. Re-engaging with those groups becomes much more realistic once the acute withdrawal passes.
So we secure the physical environment, we map out our time, we survive the acute phase, but then the loud physical fight turns into a quiet psychological marathon. We need to talk about the 30-day nervous system reset.
It is absolutely crucial to view this not as a test of willpower, but as the literal biological timeline required for your nervous system to physically rebuild its receptors.
Week 1 is completely dominated by the acute physical symptoms we already discussed. The sweating, the lack of sleep, the physical urgency.
Then you transition into weeks 2 and 3. This is where you face profound emotional turbulence. You will likely experience a very flat mood, which is called anhedonia, and incredibly low motivation.
This happens because your dopamine levels have just bottomed out, right?
Right.
Normal, everyday activities do not produce enough dopamine to make you feel good.
Exactly. The neuroplasticity takes time to reverse. Moving into weeks 4 through 6, your brain slowly upregulates those receptors. You finally start to see gradual stabilization and clearer thinking.
But the timeline has a hidden trap. Weeks 2 and 3 are actually the most dangerous phase of the entire process.
The danger lies in the subtlety. The physical symptoms are not as loud as week 1, so you naturally drop your guard. During this window, an internal voice will inevitably suggest that controlled use might be feasible now.
Same here. I remember that rationalization vividly. You feel slightly better physically, so your brain convinces you that you can handle just one hit.
But for long-term daily users, the neural pathways for daily use are deeply entrenched. One single use floods the brain with artificial dopamine and typically leads right back to daily use.
Which leads us to the most critical rule of the entire reset period. You must never evaluate your decision to quit from the middle of a withdrawal cycle.
Do not trust your own rationalizations during weeks 2 and 3. You have to give the biological process 6 full weeks before you evaluate anything about your new lifestyle.
Since we know the biology is fighting us, we need to give the listener some practical tools to artificially reduce the symptom intensity so they can actually maintain their plan.
For severe sleep disruption, taking magnesium glycinate at night is highly effective. Combining that with a very low dose of melatonin, specifically 0.5 to 1 milligram, significantly reduces the insomnia.
And what about the daytime anxiety when your thoughts are racing?
There is a specific supplement called Lycia, derived from lavender. It physically restricts the over-release of excitatory neurotransmitters to calm the physical sensation of anxiety without being addictive.
We also have to highlight cardiovascular exercise as a structural tool.
Doing steady-state cardio forces your brain to release BDNF. Even just a 20-minute run accelerates the repair of your dopamine systems that are running depleted.
We also need to issue a very strict warning about the most dangerous pitfall in the first month: alcohol.
You must completely avoid alcohol in the first 2 weeks. Alcohol is the single most common relapse pathway we consistently see.
People think they are taking the edge off, but they are actually dismantling their own structural defenses.
Alcohol heavily impairs the prefrontal cortex. Your inhibitions drop, your limbic system completely takes over, and your well-constructed plan simply falls apart. Keep alcohol entirely out of the equation.
Quitting weed is fundamentally a neurochemical reset that requires rigid architecture. It is not a moral victory that requires endless reserves of emotional motivation.
The underlying biology dictates the strategy. Structure beats willpower every single time.
Think about how many times you have harshly judged yourself as weak or flawed in the past when your attempts fell apart. Consider that the reality was simply that you were trying to fight deep neurobiology with volatile emotions instead of environmental architecture. It is truly fascinating how deeply our society reinforces this willpower myth. Perhaps a culture built on constant consumption profits off you believing that you just need to try harder next time, rather than realizing you need to change the system around you. More at quitsmoking-weed.com.